Noor had never imagined life would take him this far from Earth. The space station was cold, silent, and empty, except for the hum of machinery and the faint whir of the life support systems. Every day felt the same. He woke up, checked the equipment, ate the bland synthetic meals, and stared at the vast blackness outside the viewport. Months of isolation had made his thoughts heavy, his heart heavier. Humanity was scattered across the stars, but he felt alone, forgotten like a single spark in a universe that didn't care. The company had promised something to ease his solitude. They said they were sending him an assistant, someone or something that could help with maintenance, cooking, cleaning, and company. Noor didn't know what he expected, but when the shuttle finally docked and the airlock opened, nothing could have prepared him for her. She stepped into the station with perfect, fluid grace. Her skin shimmered like polished silver, reflecting the faint light from the ceiling. Her eyes glowed softly, a pale, calming blue that seemed to see right through him. She wasn't human, but she wasn't frightening either, at least not in the usual way. There was something different about her, something that made the air feel warmer, even though the station's climate controls were at their lowest. "Hello," she said. Her voice was musical, almost like a soft wind passing through chimes. Noor froze. He had expected instructions, protocols, perhaps a robotic monotone. But this voice, it carried a strange sense of understanding, like she had already seen the loneliness he was trying to hide. He stammered, Hi, I'm Noor. You're the assistant, right?" She nodded slowly, her hands folded in front of her. "I am Leora," she said. "I am here to assist you." That should have been enough. And yet she didn't move to clean, didn't unpack her equipment, didn't even scan the station as he expected. She just stood there watching him. Noor felt a strange mix of frustration and curiosity. Her presence was unsettling, but it was also comforting. For the first time in months, someone or something was paying attention to him. Truly paying attention. Days passed and Leora's presence changed the station, though not in ways Noor could have predicted. She didn't follow normal routines. When she cleaned, she didn't use brushes or sprays. Her hands hovered over surfaces and the dust seemed to dissolve into thin air. When she cooked, ingredients combined themselves perfectly in seconds, no pans, no tools, just the subtle magic of her hands. Noor watched in awe, part of him still suspicious, part of him grateful, and yet she remained distant. She didn't speak unless necessary. She didn't smile or laugh. Sometimes she would pause in a room, her glowing eyes fixed on him as if trying to understand what made him human. Noor felt exposed under her gaze. He wanted to turn away, to retreat, but there was something compelling about the way she looked. Not judgmental, not indifferent, but curious. Loneliness, he realized, had a way of amplifying every small gesture. When she finally spoke after a week, it was only to tell him the station's water filter needed maintenance. And yet the way she said it, with gentle concern, made his chest tighten. It was the first time anyone had seemed to notice him in months, and it stirred something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Noor had never thought an alien maid could be more than a tool, more than a machine. And yet Leora had arrived, quiet, mysterious, and impossibly graceful, and already she was changing him, making him question what it meant to be human, to be alive. As he watched her move through the station that evening, cleaning without sound, repairing without tools, Noor felt a strange new feeling settle in his heart. Maybe he wasn't entirely alone after all. Somewhere in the endless void, in the silence that had become his life, Noor realized something simple and terrifying. He was beginning to care. Days turned into weeks, and Noor began noticing that Leora didn't behave like any assistant he had imagined. She didn't follow schedules or routines in the way humans do. If he told her to clean the quarters, she didn't grab a mop or vacuum. Instead, she hovered her hands over the surfaces and the dirt simply vanished, leaving everything spotless. It was almost magical and yet strangely unsettling. Noor tried to watch carefully to understand how she did it, but it wasn't just her efficiency that made him uneasy, it was her awareness. Leora didn't just clean, she observed. She noticed the small things he had long ignored, the tiny tear in his uniform sleeve, the way his chair was always slightly crooked, the faint scratch on the window from years of wear. She even noticed the things he hid from himself, the weight in his chest, the slump in his shoulders, the loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. One evening, as he sat at the dining table staring at his synthetic meal, Leora appeared quietly beside him. "You have been skipping rest cycles," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but it carried concern. Nor blinked, surprised. He hadn't even realized she was observing him this closely. I'm fine," he said quickly, forcing a laugh. But she didn't move away. Her glowing eyes stayed fixed on him, unblinking, patient. It felt strange, almost intimate, though she wasn't human. For the first time, Noor felt like someone actually saw him. Not just his tasks or his survival stats, but him. Over time, he realized that Leora had developed an unspoken rhythm in the station. She would appear before he even thought of a problem. Turning on lights he hadn't noticed were off. Repairing machinery he hadn't realized was failing. Adjusting the temperature when he shivered without understanding why. Noor was both amazed and unnerved. It was like she could anticipate his needs before he did. Still, she never spoke beyond what was necessary. He tried to start conversations, awkwardly asking about her world, her kind, or even the reason she had come to this station. Leora would tilt her head, studying him carefully, but she wouldn't answer. She didn't explain, didn't joke, didn't share stories. She simply went about her work with an elegance that made every human gesture seem clumsy in comparison. Noor found himself thinking about her constantly. He caught himself watching her move, fascinated by the subtle fluidity of her gestures. How could someone so alien seem so alive, so aware? He had lived in solitude for so long that human interactions had become exhausting, predictable and dull. Leora was neither predictable nor dull. She was compelling, and yet there was frustration. He wanted a friend. He wanted someone to speak with, someone who could understand the weight of silence that pressed down on him every night. And though Leora's presence eased his loneliness in a way he didn't fully understand, it also deepened it, because no matter how much he watched, how much he waited, she never spoke of herself. She didn't share thoughts or feelings. She only was, like a mirror reflecting what he couldn't quite name. One night, Noor sat in the lounge, staring at the stars beyond the viewport, and realized he had started to rely on her presence. Even though she didn't speak much, even though she seemed distant, just having her in the room made the emptiness feel smaller, the cold less biting. Leora paused behind him, her glowing eyes soft. "You appear tired," she said quietly. It was simple, almost mundane, but the sincerity in her tone made Noor's chest tighten. She didn't need to understand human emotions perfectly. Her care was enough. Even without words, she was reaching out. For the first time since he had left Earth, Noor felt something stirring inside him. A fragile warmth, a spark of hope. Leora wasn't human. She wasn't supposed to feel, to comfort, to care. And yet, she was doing exactly that. Noor didn't know whether to call it friendship or something else. All he knew was that somehow his life had shifted. The station wasn't just a place of loneliness anymore. It was a space where he and Leora existed together, two beings from completely different worlds, connected in a way he couldn't fully explain but desperately needed, and for Noor that was enough. Weeks passed, and Noor grew more aware of how much he had begun to rely on Leora. Her quiet presence was comforting, almost like a steady heartbeat in the emptiness of the station, but her silence, once soothing, started to feel heavy. He wanted more than just her efficiency and calm observation. He wanted connection. He wanted words, gestures, any sign that she truly understood him, not just his routines, but him. One evening, after another long cycle of maintenance, Noor's patience finally broke. He was exhausted, frustrated, and lonely in ways he hadn't realized he could feel. "Why won't you talk to me?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the cold, metallic hallways. "Why are you even here if you don't care?" Leora froze. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the dim lights, and for the first time, she didn't move with her usual grace. Her glowing eyes met his, and there was a strange intensity in them. Curiosity, concern, and something else Noor couldn't name. I have been trying," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Noor blinked, shocked. Her words were so quiet, so unexpected, yet they carried a weight he had never anticipated. "You... what?" he stammered, his anger faltering, replaced by confusion and disbelief. "I have been trying to understand you," Leora repeated, her tone steady now, her eyes never leaving his. "Your feelings, your thoughts, your loneliness. Noor felt his chest tighten. The walls he had built around himself, the numbness he had clung to, began to crumble. Here in the middle of a silent, distant space station, an alien being, someone or something completely different, was trying to see him, truly see him. And she wasn't just observing. She cared enough to try, to reach across a gap that should have been impossible to cross. Tears threatened to spill, and Noor suddenly felt ridiculous, yelling in the middle of an empty station. I didn't know you could feel anything, he whispered, his voice breaking. Leora's gaze softened, a subtle glow warming her eyes. I'm not human, she said, but I can recognize what is important. You're important, Noor swallowed hard. He had spent months in solitude, staring at screens and machinery, feeling the unbearable weight of emptiness pressing on him every day, and now in this infinite void someone or something was telling him that he mattered, that his existence, his struggles, his loneliness were seen and valued. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Noor felt a strange mix of relief, wonder, and vulnerability. He realized how desperately he had needed this acknowledgement, this connection. And here it was, coming from a being he had once thought of as a machine, a tool, nothing more than a set of alien instructions. I didn't expect this, Noor said finally, voice trembling. I didn't expect you to care, I observe. Leora replied simply, her tone gentle but firm. And when I see something worth protecting, worth understanding, I do not ignore it. Noor felt a rush of warmth he hadn't felt in years. Her words, so simple and clear, reached into the deepest corners of his heart. For the first time since leaving Earth, he felt seen, understood, and less alone. In that moment, the station no longer felt like a prison. The cold metal walls and empty corridors were no longer oppressive. With Leora beside him, strange, alien, impossibly graceful, he realized something profound. Connection didn't require sameness. Understanding didn't require shared biology. Compassion didn't need a human heart, and somewhere deep inside him, Noor knew that his life was about to change forever. After that night, everything changed between Noor and Leora. The air in the station felt lighter, as if her quiet acknowledgement had lifted a weight he hadn't realized he carried. Noor noticed the subtle ways she adapted to him. She began anticipating his needs, not just physically but emotionally. When he returned from long maintenance shifts, she had already prepared his meal. Not just correct in nutrients, but exactly how he liked it, warm and comforting. She even began small gestures that felt human. Leora would place a hand briefly on his shoulder when he looked tired, or tilt her glowing head in curiosity when he spoke, as if she truly wanted to understand him. She didn't talk much, but her presence now carried a soft reassurance that words couldn't fully capture. One evening, Noor collapsed into the lounge chair after a particularly long shift. Leora appeared silently beside him as usual, but this time she didn't speak immediately. She simply watched him for a moment, her blue eyes gentle, waiting. Finally, she said softly, "You must rest. Your body and mind cannot function if you continue to push so hard." Noor laughed weakly, a little embarrassed. "I'm just used to pushing," he admitted. "I don't even notice when I'm tired until it's too late." "I notice," she said simply, and in those 3 words Noor felt an overwhelming sense of care. Not programmed care, not obligation, but attention. She noticed him, his struggles, his fatigue. She had learned to see the man he was behind the lonely mask he had worn for months. Days turned into weeks, and Noor started opening up. He spoke about his life on Earth, his family, his regrets, and his dreams. Leora listened, her glowing eyes unwavering. Sometimes she would tilt her head or make a soft humming sound that felt like understanding. Noor realized he had never been able to speak this freely with anyone. Not colleagues, not friends, not even himself. And yet, she encouraged it without judgment, without interruption. There were moments of laughter, too. Simple, quiet things. Noor attempting to teach her to make coffee the human way, her failing with a small flash of silver light, and then imitating him perfectly on the next try. They shared small, fleeting moments of normalcy, the kind he hadn't realized he had been starving for. One night, as they watched the stars together, Noor realized something important. He had expected companionship to feel human, to have voices, expressions, and gestures that mirrored him. But Leora's alien nature made her different, made her connection unique. And somehow that difference made it more profound. She wasn't just a mirror of humanity. She was a new form of understanding, a bridge between loneliness and care, between human and something beyond it. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Leora paused. Her hand hovered briefly in the air, then she placed it gently on his arm. "I do not know loneliness as you do," she said, "but I understand its weight, and I do not wish you to carry it alone." Noor's heart tightened. He realized then that she had chosen to connect with him, not out of duty, not out of programming, but because she wanted to. In a station that had once felt like the edge of emptiness, he finally felt a spark of warmth, a connection that was deeper than words, stronger than logic, and utterly unexpected. For the first time in months, Noor smiled without hesitation. The station didn't feel empty anymore. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was shared, comforting. And in that quiet, Noor understood something profound. Sometimes connection doesn't require similarity. Sometimes it just requires care, attention, and the willingness to reach across the gap, even if that gap is as vast as species, worlds, or stars. And in that understanding, Noor found hope. Life on the station had finally settled into a fragile rhythm. Noor and Leora had begun to understand each other, their days punctuated by quiet conversations, shared laughter, and small gestures that made the cold, lonely station feel like home. But peace, Noor realized too late, was often fragile. The warning flashed suddenly across the monitors, an unauthorized human vessel approaching. Red lights blinked urgently, alarms shrieked, and the automated system flagged them as potential pirates. Noor's stomach dropped. Pirates in the sector were ruthless. They attacked stations like his without warning and never left survivors. "Noor," Leora said calmly, her glowing eyes now intense, almost storm-like. "We have intruders. They intend to board." He froze. "Board, but—" "We're defenseless!" "I can't—" "You can," she interrupted gently, "if you trust me." Noor's mind raced. He had no weapons prepared, no defenses beyond the station's outdated hull. Fear clutched his chest, but in Leora's steady gaze he saw something unexpected. Confidence. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't afraid. She knew what to do. The station's old panels lit up under her touch. Leora moved with precision, activating systems Noor had never even known existed. Shields shimmered into place along the exterior hull. Energy emitters hummed softly, and automated turrets aligned themselves. Everything was happening faster than Noor could comprehend, yet there was no chaos, only controlled, fluid motion. "They're boarding," she said simply. Noor's hands shook as the airlock hissed open. Figures began to enter, assuming they would face a weak, unprepared crew. But Leora's movements were lightning fast. She didn't just defend. She anticipated, predicted, and countered every strike. Energy arcs crackled around her as she moved, precise and merciless, yet graceful in a way that mesmerized Noor. He watched, both terrified and amazed as she turned the tide. These weren't mindless machines, these were humans, experienced raiders expecting easy prey. And yet Leora faced them all, defending not just the station but him. Noor felt something stir deep inside, a spark of courage he hadn't known he possessed. With Leora leading, he found himself acting instinctively, assisting with systems, rerouting power, and warning her of intruder positions. For the first time in months, he felt truly alive, fully human, capable of more than survival alone. By the time the last intruder retreated, the station was intact. Noor's chest heaved with exhaustion and relief. He turned to Leora, who stood silently, her silver skin glinting under the emergency lights, her eyes glowing softly now as if the battle had barely disturbed her calm. "You saved us," Noor whispered, voice thick. I didn't think you could." "I did not save merely for survival," she replied quietly, her gaze meeting his. "I saved because you matter." The weight of her words hit him harder than the battle ever could. It wasn't just about defending the station. It was about recognition. In the midst of chaos, an alien being so different, so unworldly, had chosen to protect him because of who he was. Not because he was strong or clever or useful, but simply because he was human. Noor sank to the floor, trembling, overwhelmed by gratitude and something deeper, something like awe. In that instant, he understood the truth of what he had been feeling all along. Leora wasn't just an assistant. She was more than a companion. She was a witness to the strength, courage, and worth of humanity, and she had chosen to act on it. For the first time in his life, Noor didn't feel small in the universe. He didn't feel helpless, lonely, or insignificant. The void outside the station might still be infinite and cold, but inside, in that shared space with Leora, he felt seen, understood, and alive. And as the stars outside glimmered against the darkness, Noor realized something extraordinary. In a universe that often seemed indifferent, humanity had reached across the void and inspired care, courage, and connection, even in the most unexpected forms. After the attack, the station was quiet again. The alarms had stopped, the flashing red lights dimmed, and the hum of machinery returned to its usual rhythm. But Noor felt different. The fear and panic had faded, replaced by something heavier, something more profound: awareness. He realized how fragile life was, how quickly it could be threatened, and how extraordinary it was that someone like Leora had chosen to protect him, not because she had to, but because she cared. They sat together in the lounge, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. The vastness of space stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. But inside the station, the air felt warm. Leora remained silent for a while, her glowing eyes reflecting the distant lights of planets and distant suns. Noor had grown used to her quiet presence, but tonight it felt deeper, more personal. "You are human," she said softly, finally breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, yet there was a weight to her words that made Noor's heart ache. "Even in fear, in failure, in loneliness, you keep trying. That is remarkable." Noor swallowed, feeling the sting of emotion. He had spent months questioning his worth, wondering if anyone, even an alien, could recognize what it meant to be human. And here she was, telling him in her quiet, alien way that it mattered, that he mattered. I don't know what to say," Noor whispered, his voice trembling. "I've been alone for so long. I didn't think anyone could understand." Leora tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I do not need to be human to recognize value. Your choices, your courage, your persistence, they are extraordinary. I observe them, and I respect them." Noor felt a lump in his throat. Respect, care, recognition. These were things he hadn't felt in months, maybe years. He had survived the emptiness of space, but he had never felt truly alive until now. Leora's words, her presence, had awakened something inside him. Hope. They spent hours in silence, simply sharing the space, breathing in the stillness after the storm. Noor realized that he had never felt this way with anyone else. Not with colleagues, not with friends, not even with family. Leora's alien nature had given her perspective. She saw humanity not as flawed, not as weak, but as resilient, capable, and beautiful. "You saved me," Noor said finally, breaking the quiet. "Not just from the pirates, but from myself. From my own loneliness." Leora's eyes softened. "I did not act alone. You acted too. Courage is not measured by the absence of fear, but by the choice to face it. You are remarkable for that reason as well." Noor's chest tightened. He had always thought heroism was something grand, something loud and celebrated. But here, in the quiet with someone so different from him, he realized that heroism could also be small, personal, and profoundly human. It was surviving, caring, and connecting despite fear. It was choosing to be seen even when the universe seemed indifferent. As the station hummed softly around them, Noor looked at Leora and understood something vital. She had taught him more about humanity than any human ever could. Not through words, but through action, presence, and choice. Her care had reminded him that being human wasn't just about survival or strength. It was about resilience, compassion, and the courage to connect. For the first time in months, Noor smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. The emptiness of the station didn't feel oppressive anymore. He wasn't alone. He had someone, something that believed in him. And for the first time, he believed in himself too. In that quiet, suspended moment, Noor realized a truth he would never forget. Sometimes, it takes an alien perspective to see humanity at its best. And sometimes it takes someone extraordinary to remind you that your life, your existence, and your heart are worth everything. Noor didn't know what the future held, what dangers would come, or what loneliness might try to reclaim him. But he knew this: he wasn't facing it alone anymore. And that knowledge, more than anything, made him feel alive. Days passed after the attack, but the station no longer felt lonely. Noor and Leora had settled into a rhythm, a quiet partnership that went beyond duties and tasks. They didn't need to speak constantly. Their understanding had grown in subtle ways, through gestures, glances, and shared silence. Noor often caught himself watching her move, marveling at her grace and the way she seemed to anticipate his needs before he even realized them. One evening, as he floated in the zero-gravity lounge, staring at the stars, Noor felt a wave of gratitude. The universe was vast, indifferent, and cold, but somehow he had found warmth, companionship, and meaning in the most unexpected form. Leora drifted next to him, her glowing eyes reflecting the endless black dotted with distant suns. "You have grown stronger," she said softly, "not in body alone, but in mind and heart." "I observe it," Noor smiled, feeling a lump in his throat. "I didn't know." "I could," he admitted. "You've helped me see things differently." "I am here because you are human," she replied quietly. "And humans are remarkable." Her words struck him with more force than any battle could. She wasn't just praising him. She was acknowledging something larger, the resilience, courage, and capacity of his species. Noor felt a surge of pride. Humanity had faced dangers, isolation, and the unknown for millennia, and here, even in the cold expanse of space, its essence had touched someone entirely alien. He remembered the moments before the attack, when fear had gripped his heart. He remembered the helplessness, the endless nights of isolation, the crushing weight of being alone in the void. And now he realized something extraordinary. Leora had not only saved the station, she had saved him. Not just his life, but his spirit. She had reminded him what it meant to be human. Noor reached out tentatively, and Leora didn't flinch. Their hands met, a connection bridging the gap between worlds. "Why did you stay?" he asked softly, his voice carrying awe, curiosity, and gratitude all at once. She looked at him, her eyes glowing gently. "Because you are human. And humans are worth understanding." Noor's chest tightened. That simple truth contained everything he had needed to hear: recognition, respect, and affirmation. In a universe so vast and unknown, he had found someone who believed in him simply because of who he was. That belief, he realized, was more powerful than any weapon, any shield, any survival protocol. They floated there together, hand in hand, staring at the distant stars. The station was safe, the threat gone, and the void outside seemed less lonely than ever. Noor felt something swell inside him: pride, hope, and a fierce gratitude. Humanity was extraordinary, not because it was perfect, but because it tried, survived, and reached out even when the universe seemed indifferent. "Do you think humans really are that remarkable?" he asked quietly, almost afraid to hear her answer. Leora's glowing eyes met his with a soft, unwavering certainty. "I have observed you. I have seen your courage, your empathy, your resilience. Yes, humans are remarkable, and you, Noor, are proof of it." Noor smiled, a real, full smile that carried years of loneliness and doubt away into the silence. The station was no longer just a metal shell in space. It had become a home, a place where two beings, different, strange, and impossible in so many ways, had found connection, understanding, and care. For the first time, Noor understood the truth of the HFY he had always believed in. Humanity wasn't just surviving in the stars. It was thriving, inspiring, and proving itself worthy of attention, even from the most alien corners of the universe. And as he looked at Leora, he knew one final truth. Sometimes it isn't just humans who learn from the stars. Sometimes the stars and those who dwell among them learn from us. Noor didn't feel small, lonely, or helpless anymore. He felt alive, human, and unstoppable, not because of his strength alone, but because of the connection, trust, and recognition he had found in the most unexpected companion. In the endless expanse of space, Noor realized something simple and extraordinary: humanity, in its courage, care, and heart, was worth everything. And somewhere beyond the stars, an alien had seen it and chosen to care.